السميع العليم من الشيطان الرجيم بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم الحمد لله رب العالمين والصلاة والسلام على أشرف الأنبياء والمرسلين سيدنا Muhammad وعلى آله وصحبه أجمعين. So those of you who came in for the Isha prayer, we were talking about the impact of anti-Islamic bigotry on the family, and one of the things I wanted to share just to close this out was that we shouldn't allow the hatred or the hate-filled environment to really create in us almost a second-class mentality where we are even afraid to react as a Muslim would react in certain situations. So I wanted to share this with you before we close off for the night. I was at LaGuardia Airport about 2 years ago. It was Ramadan was coming up, and I was coming home from a trip, and I happened to be in LaGuardia, and then I would go to Washington, D.C. The flights were delayed, and there were some cancellations, so I was in a mess. I was trying to get home, and I was standing in line with the rest of the people trying to figure out how to go home. While I was standing there, I looked in the middle of all of this hustle and bustle. There was a young woman, had a bag next to her, and this was summer, like around June, and she was just crying, like intensely crying. And everybody was running past her, rushing past her, and nobody was stopping to say, like, are you okay? What's wrong? What's the matter? And so as I was standing in line, I looked at her and I thought, you know, you're a Muslim. This could be your sister, your mother, you're anybody from your family. So shouldn't you at least inquire? The second thought was, you're a social worker. You're supposed to be helping people all the time. So shouldn't you inquire? And the third thought was, looking like you do, if you go up to a woman who's already crying, you're going to be the one arrested before anything happens, so what do you do? So I went with my first instinct. I walked up to her and I said, excuse me, what's wrong? What's the matter? And she said, I'm trying to get from here, New York, I live in New York City, to South Carolina, and the only flight to get there soon goes through DC. And I said, why is it urgent? She said, it's an emergency. Her older sister had just lost her child in childbirth and in delivery, and they were at the hospital, and she was seeing how to get from New York to South Carolina, and the only way to go was through DC. And how could she do it with all these delays and cancellations and whatnot? So I went up to the agent when it was my turn, and I said, sir, I have a request. I said, when it's my turn and I can get a seat on that flight to DC, can you put her instead of me? You know, because you can't change names, you can't change anything. And he was looking at me like, are you together? And I said, no. I said, she needs to get to South Carolina and she needs to be on that flight. So he looked and he looked and he looked and he said, well, you have an economy seat. And I said, well, that's how most of us fly. Have you looked at our budget? So I said, that's all I have. He said, well, the only thing I have, everything is booked. I have one opening in first class, but it's going to cost you this much to upgrade from economy to first class. I said, don't worry about it. I'll pay for it right now, but she has to fly. So he said, I'll change the ticket over to her, but you realize that you give up everything at this point, and so whenever we can get you on the plane, or whatever other flight. So I said, that's fine, that's what needs to happen. So I did that, and I walked away. As I'm walking away, he calls out and he says, sir, and while every flight is being changed, some people are changing their flights, he found an open seat, and he said, actually, I have another seat, you can still go on this flight, and because you've already paid, I'll just put you in that economy seat, and she'll go in this first class seat. So we get on the plane, she's sitting in the first class, and she says, no, you go in the first class, I'll go to the economy seat. And so we're having this whole, Hyderabadi takalluf, should I go here after you? No, after you. And the people are trying to fly. So I said, go to first class, because if you sit in first class, when the plane door opens, you can rush to your connecting flight and not have to worry about waiting, right? So when the plane takes off, everything the air hostess brings, it's a short flight, whatever drinks and snacks in first class, she keeps telling her to send it back to me. So this woman, the poor woman, is taking the stuff and walking all the way back through everybody and coming to me saying, sir, if you don't mind, the lady in 2B or 2 whatever is saying that you should really have all this. And I'm saying, no, it's really, give it back to her. All that goes on, the plane lands and we leave, and I go about my business. But I'm leaving, I gave her my card saying, if you get stuck, something happens, just let me know. I can get someone to help you, whatever we can do. I don't hear from her. This is the summer. I go back to campus in August, the beginning of the semester. I find 3 greeting card envelopes in my inbox, not my inbox, in my mailbox, right, at work. And I'm thinking, who are these people? I don't recognize the names. There's different names. As I open them up, she sent me a thank you note, long letter. Her sister-in-law, which means the brother of her sister's, the husband, that sister-in-law sent me a thank you note, and another sister sent me a thank you cards. I took all of them and I kept them. I thought, this is amazing, subhanAllah. It's the end of it. We'll never, our paths will not intersect. A year and a half goes by, and I get an email from a woman who works in Senator Lindsey Graham's office saying, Senator Lindsey Graham would like to meet you. Now, he is Republican. I am Altaf. Right? So I said, what's happening? So I said, I can always meet whatever, It turns out, subhanAllah, and that's how I want to close with this, the young woman I helped, not only made it, it's a little bit emotional, not only made it to South Carolina, but it made such a profound impact on her in that family because she made it in time to hold the baby that had passed away before they would take the baby for burial and so on and so forth. She, the sister from New York, got to hold the baby. So who is she? Why is she important? It turns out she's the goddaughter of Senator Lindsey Graham. And he is saying, the whole family was coming to DC for something, so he says, who is that person that helped you? I want to meet who that person is. And then not only that, he says, I want to host them for lunch in the Senate dining room, which is like so small and so antique that I don't know who else eats there except for the senators and their guests. So I said, I will come, but the senator needs to know who I am. So I wrote out all my life story. I am this, I'm with MSA, I'm with ISNA, so I said, in case he finds out who I am and then he goes, nah, maybe we won't do lunch, right? So I said, this is who I am. I'm not hiding it, I just want you to know. So I send it back to him, and the one line comes back. The senator says he already knows everything about you that he needs to know. And he doesn't mean FBI, he means from the action, just in case some people are like not getting it all, right? Like he means just from the actions that I did. So I say to them, our baby is very small, only like at that time he was maybe less than a year old, so we can't leave him with anyone because we're very precious about our family. So he says, bring the baby. So they host us in the dining room of the Senate. He picks up his phone to call Senator John McCain to say, you got to come meet this guy. Senator McCain comes running from whatever he is doing. Then he takes my wife and I, full hijab, everything else for her, not me, for her, through the Capitol building for a 2-hour tour. We're supposed to meet for like half an hour, 40 minutes, a full tour, clearing every security possible, and here's a muhajjaba and a bearded man with a baby in a stroller running through the Capitol. He's pointing out stuff. All I can say to you is that at the end of it, it was Dhuhr time, and then I had to go to teach. And I said, I need to pray. He said to his staff, he goes, is the conference room being used? They said, no. He opened the door, and he goes, today, this is your mosque, right? And my wife and I prayed in that conference room. As we came out, a massive pro-life movement, protest was happening there. He didn't have to come out. He came all the way out with my wife, then told his staff to drive us to the Union Station close by, and I thought that was the end of it. This year, we come back from ISNA convention at the Dulles airport in the train, and the train is coming from A terminal to C where we are. We get on the train, my wife, myself, our 4 kids get on the train. Guess who's standing inside that train? Senator Lindsey Graham. In front of all those people, he goes, hey, right? To a Republican, to go hey to a bunch of Muslims, getting onto a train, and not in a hey, I'm about to, is a big deal, right? SubhanAllah, we took our requisite selfies, and then he called his staff immediately, the mother of the young girl I helped, and he told her, hey, he's here, they're all here, and then he put my wife on the phone, they gave her his phone, which is like a big deal, right? Because senators have like these secret phones. His is a flip lid, and he doesn't mind me telling anybody that. So She talks on the phone and all that. When we finish, he says, isn't your son still in scouting? Boy Scouts and Cub Scouts. He said, yes. He said, don't forget, I told you, if your scouting troop wants to come to have a personal tour, my staff will arrange the Muslim scouts to get a tour of the Capitol building. Why do I give you that story? All to say that for decades, the Muslim community has been trying to say, let's get to the senators, let's get to the Congress people, let's get to this, that, and the other. When Allah opens doors, it's literally like we're family friends now. They exchange pictures, the other family that we helped with us, give us updates on Senator Lindsey Graham, this and that. Even if you spent millions of dollars to get close to people, for a political reason, it may not be what Allah has in mind for you when you open it up from a human reason. Helping somebody who's in need, the only thing that drove me was, she could be my sister, my mother, my somebody, and shouldn't I talk to her and get her to be helped? So in this climate, I could have been very scared and said, no, that's not my business, and I want to go home. I'm not going to mess with that, right? So subhanAllah, keep that in mind. So this was something very precious for me. Why I wanted to share that is because this is the kind of story that should be repeating in every neighborhood in America, where Muslims are there and people say, oh my God, if it wasn't for the Muslims, our neighborhood would be completely upside down. They teach us family values. They teach us about loving our parents and respecting our parents. Their kids are the most polite and respectful and loving and compassionate. This should be news. This should be news. And I'll close with this. Abdullah ibn Mubarak, you know, one of the beloved in all of the history of Islam, his neighbor was actually a Jewish man. And the Jewish man was ready to move. At the time, the value of the property, you know, appraisal-wise or whatever, was approximately 1,000 dinar. So anybody who came to buy would know that it would cost about 1,000 to buy his house. He doubled the price. And not for the reasons your mind is going to. He doubled the price. And the people were very upset and angry, and they said, what are you talking about? You know it costs 1,000 dinar. Why are you doubling the price? He said, if you knew the neighbor that you would be acquiring by virtue of living here, you would pay that much and even more. Are you following what I'm saying? We check for school districts, we check for crime reports, we check for all these things before we buy homes and neighbor and apartments or whatever, but we never check to see who is our neighbor and what kind of neighbor are we to them. And in this climate, they need to hear from us. They need to see us, inshallah. So I will close with that, but I wanted to share that story with you because it really makes a difference in our hearts and minds when you just be a Muslim. Just be a Muslim and be confident, inshallah, and Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala will take care of the rest of it. I'll turn it back over to Brother Yusufi Wali.
Jazakumullah khairan.